Okay, I'm about through rebuilding this gearbox on this New Holland 256 roller bar rake from my buddy. He let somebody borrow it and they was trying to rake hay and plow at the same time. It was just running it too low by the number of teeth that was broke on the bars and bent. So they tore up this dry shaft. He had to replace it. He'd already replaced it, but the basket wouldn't turn. It was like teeth was missing off of the gear somewhere. Well, I tore into the gearbox, and this input shaft gear was almost touching the bottom of the gearbox. In fact, on the inside of the cover, the gear was low enough that it was actually rubbing the inside of the gearbox cover. But we took this shaft out and found out that the shaft had been put together wrong. The cup part of the bearing was in the gearbox right, but the cone bearing was turned upside down with another cup of a bearing over it with no seal, and that was actually letting this gear set way too low, so the teeth was not meshing with the output shaft gear. So I pulled this shaft out and then spun the reel, and you could hear the bearings on the output shaft popping. So when I took it off, the grease, you could tell it had water in it, and most of y'all know that's had any dealings with this type rake, that water is bad to get in these gearboxes over time. So we took it out and ordered new sets of bearings. If you need the bearings, the top bearing up here is a Timken set 2. You need one of those. And the bottom bearing and the 2 output shaft bearings are Timken set 6. You need 3 of those. That's the set is the cup and the cone part of the bearing. And then the seals, I crossed New Holland's number with a national number, and there's other seal manufacturers you can buy, but I just went with national. Their number is 352541. Well, I decided to put the input shaft, after I got the bearings and the seals, I put all the output shaft components together and went ahead and put it on the rake and hooked up the star for the reel, went ahead and bolted everything up. And then I dry fitted just the gear and the shaft with the bottom bearing and the seal in place and the nut and washer at the top. I didn't use the clutch or the spring or the spring cup or anything. I just dry fitted it to see how my teeth was meshing in the back of the gearbox. So I got my inspection mirror after I dry fitted it and a flashlight where I could see how they meshed, and they wasn't meshing enough for my liking. So I took it apart and got me a machine bushing, which is 1.25 inch, big flat washer, inside diameter 1.25 inch, and I put it between the bottom of this input shaft gear and the bearing, which this gear sets right on the nose end of the cone bearing anyway, but you could tell it was wore some on the bottom. So I got one that was 14 gauge thick, and then dry fitted again, and then used my mirror to see if how they was meshing. Is meshing a little bit too tight. So I took it apart and found me a machine bushing 1.25 inch 18 gauge and put it in there, and they fit, to me, almost perfect. They got gap between, they don't bottom out, but they got just a little bit of play in between the teeth of the gear. So we put everything back there together. The only thing I like is putting the yoke and the yoke shaft back in, and we have made some improvements, being we're going to run grease and not have to worry about putting oil in this thing. Went to the hardware and got a 3/8 street ale, Teflon tape the male threads and the plug and put that in there so it would rain wouldn't run in around the vent hole where the cotter pin is. And then on the yoke shaft, got a boot, gear shift boot for a tractor. And I picked this one up at the local Napa store, I think for about $3. There's your part number if you can see it. And I cut it down to the shape of the gearbox so it would repel water around the shape of the gearbox there to keep the water out. And I also put a UV resistant tie wrap on the top and snugged it up so the boot wouldn't turn when you throw it in and out of gear. And being we're gonna run grease, there's no way that this top bearing is gonna ever get any grease other than the first packing. So I come in here and I drilled and tapped for a 1/4 28 grease fitting so you can grease it. And then on the output shaft, after I got the gearbox cleaned up, I drilled and tapped it on the side because if you put it on the top, water's bad to stand in this area here, and I figured it would seep in around the grease fitting. So I put it on the side so that these two bearings on the output shaft would get grease and water wouldn't seep in around the grease fitting. I hope this helps you in the field and keeps you from having a lot of downtime. Till next time, see ya.